All right, we're continuing to follow local reaction from Oklahoma lawmakers on the State of the Union address, and we are lucky enough to have Representative Tom Cole joining us this morning. Mr. Representative, thank you for your time. We appreciate having you this morning.
Hey, great to be with you.
So I want to get right to it here. We talk about the president's speech. One of the big things that he addressed was still hopeful to pass part of his Build Back Better agenda, but really that's a package that hasn't got past the Senate, has not gotten bipartisan support. The president really heavily signaled about prescription drug costs and child care costs. What are your thoughts about the president still pushing that Build Back Better plan?
I think it's a mistake. Quite frankly, one of the reasons we're having high inflation now is the explosion of spending that began the Biden administration with the so-called American Rescue Plan. Lots of government programs, honestly, that we didn't need at the time and we're paying for now. Everybody's paying for it at the pump and the grocery store. And what the president did was double down on things that you pointed out had not gotten through and are going to be extraordinarily expensive. So I don't think there's much likelihood that much of that will happen. I'm disappointed that he wasted so much time talking about what wasn't going to occur and not talking about things that need to be done, like increasing oil and gas production to help at the pump and, frankly, to position us in a better way against the Russians in Ukraine.
So you do mention that point of inflation here that we're at, and it's kind of leads to some wondering, right? Like if we don't make an adjustment in some way and have some kind of coming together here, we're just going to be stuck in this spot in this high inflation rate that people simply are telling us they can't survive on. So what has to happen to make these changes here where we can at least find some middle ground?
Yeah, well, first of all, we need to spend less domestically. There's no question about that. The president was warned, literally, not by Republicans, but by Democratic economists. The former Secretary of the Treasury for Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, who's a famous economist, former president of Harvard, said back when the American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion spending bill was passed, hey, this is going to stoke inflation. This is a bad idea. And, of course, we've had more bad ideas since then. So we're in a hole, stop digging. So let's stop doing what we know doesn't work and look at some things in terms of being more prudent about our spending that does. And let's also look at things that we can do to increase the productivity of the American economy. Again, one of the very first things President Biden did when he came into office was stop the XL pipeline, end new production or new exploration and drilling on federal lands. That's about 20%, by the way, the surface of the United States and offshore. And those things immediately started pushing up energy prices. And now you throw in the war between Russia and Ukraine, and Russia being a major oil and gas provider, that's exacerbated that problem. So we ought to be responding with incentives to produce more energy right here at home. And, you know, there's a variety of other things the president could do, but again, doubling down on what wasn't working, I think, is a big mistake.
Yeah, speaking of things that were happening, Biden introduced and made the case for his nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, calling her a consensus builder, were his exact words. Do you agree with that sentiment?
You know, to be fair, I'm in the House, obviously, not the Senate, so I don't have a vote, and I don't know her, so I want to be careful. I'm sure she's a very fine person with a terrific personal story. The fact is she's been reversed quite a few times in a rather short period on the bench, and there's no question she represents a very liberal view of things. Now, again, to be fair, this president's prerogative. He has the right of appointment. I don't know of any personally disqualifying things, but I doubt judicially I would agree with her philosophy, and I think it's probably pretty unlikely that she'll get support from our senators. I mean, we'll wait and see. They'll do their due diligence. But again, we disagree probably on the issues, but I don't have any problem with her as a person. Again, I'm sure she's academically qualified. She's got a good resume. We just don't see the law quite the same way, and I think she will come down well to the left of where most Oklahomans are.
Lastly, you touched on it briefly here. I just want to reiterate and ask one more time again, when you talk about the president and everything going on with Russia and the Ukraine, you've already mentioned a couple times the president talking about maybe not necessarily talking about what is happening and not what isn't happening or what needs to be done. What do you think the next best steps there are for the president?
Now, next best step in dealing with Russia and the Ukraine would be for us to immediately cancel Russian oil purchases. We buy about 600,000 barrels a day of petroleum and petroleum-related products from Russia. I mean, that's like feeding the beast. We're literally financing Russian troops in the field and propping up Vladimir Putin. Now, that would cause us some disruption and pain, no question about it. But we ought to do those things. Second, we ought to double down. And the president called for this, to be fair. I mean, I thought he had his best moments last night were talking about Ukraine, expressing our sympathy, our support, and the fact that we were going to get humanitarian aid to them. Those are good things. But the president also failed to mention we need to increase our own defense budget well beyond what he recommended earlier. So the two big things is let's stop importing Russian crude and petroleum products, and let's increase our own defense spending, both to warn the Chinese in the Pacific who are watching this very carefully, and to reassure our allies at home and remind the Russians that we're more than capable of defending ourselves. But I'm sorry that those two messages weren't included in what was overall otherwise pretty good remarks about Ukraine.
Representative Tom Cole, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for your time and, again, your honest reaction here to everything the president said last night.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. It's a privilege to be on with you.
All right, let's get over to